All right, special edition of Pete the Planner Television, PTPTV. We're talking healthcare, and when I talk healthcare, I talk with my man, managing director of FirstPerson.
That's right.
Paul Ashely. Paul, hello.
Hello, Peter.
We're talking healthcare. There are glasses in front of us.
The glass is neither half full nor empty yet.
It is fully empty, which only means one thing. When you're talking about the health of our nation and the health of the people in our nation, we must drink. So this is a bourbon episode of the Pete the Planner television show.
Is this brought to us by oldmajormarket.com?
Our beverage expert on the show, Mark LaFay, mutual friend, mutual acquaintance of both of ours.
Definitely.
So in honor of him, we're going to have a beverage while we talk about the biggest cluster in all of America right now.
Yeah.
Which is saying a lot. So Paul, before we start talking seriously about the healthcare problem in our country, which would you like today? Would you like the old granddad bonded in bond, or bottled in bond, or what seems like I've already been drinking, but I haven't, or the Cody Road whiskey rye whiskey out of Iowa? Which would you prefer?
So I'm going to go with the old granddad, and here's why.
Yeah.
There is an old white man on the label.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of guys who are making decisions right now about healthcare.
That's true. Okay, so in honor of them, we will.
And that was not a political statement. That's a fact.
That seemed a little political.
Well, I didn't intend it to be.
I will serve my guest last.
That's very smart. I appreciate that.
All right, Paul. Honestly, you understand healthcare better than just about anyone I know. Oh, cheers.
Yes.
To death panels. I don't know.
Ooh.
It's pretty strong. I'm not gonna lie. It's delicious though. It's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
You like it?
I do. That's good.
Okay, what's going on? So where we stand now, today is when we're recording this, the 23rd of June. Mm-hmm. We think there's going to be a vote next week. Like, where are we at? Like, what's happening?
Okay, so if you rewind and look at episode 155.
Oh, of the $1 Million Plan podcast on iTunes, or not Stitcher anymore because they...
Anyway, it's too soon. You and I did a primer on this, really.
Yeah.
And based on the draft legislation that was in the House,
yes,
which was the AHCA, the Affordable Health Care Act.
Okay.
We predicted what we thought would happen. And what happened yesterday, the 22nd of June, was the Senate released the draft of their version of the healthcare reform bill.
How different was that from the House's version?
Honestly, not significantly different.
Was it, okay, I know it's not this simple, but was it better or worse?
It depends on who you are.
Okay.
So if you're a higher income individual, it was better because there's a deeper tax cut.
In the Senate's version?
Yep. And if you're a lower income individual, you could argue that it could be worse for you because it takes deeper cuts to Medicare, or excuse me, Medicaid, which is for lower income individuals. And it makes the threshold with which credits and subsidies get issued not as generous. But quite frankly, the House bill was going to do that anyway. So either version of the bill, lower income folks are going to be adversely affected.
Heard something last night that if you want to go other than poor people affected by this, and that's seems like a weird way to say poor people.
Lower income.
Okay. Why does it, like, honestly, just saying poor people, I felt really gross right there. Because it sounds like a pejorative, but it's not meant to be.
It's not meant to be.
It's people who happen to be poor.
People who happen to make less than the federal poverty level, or only a certain times the federal poverty level, to 2 or 3 or 4 times, can qualify today under today's rules, and less or so under the future potential rules.
So other than those folks, I heard that this affects pre-65 retirees the worst.
I would agree with that, and here's why. So if you're over the age of 65, you're taken care of by Medicare.
And they're not messing with that at all?
Well, no. Essentially no. Although there's some Medicare tax changes that just, again, are the tax breaks for folks who are higher income. But they're not messing with the actual care provided, or how folks fund that. The reason that pre-65 retirees, so you're not working for an employer, therefore you don't have access to an employer's job.
Usually they're going to be older than 55, most of the times older than 59 and a half.
Usually.
To 64 and 364 days.
Correct. And a trend that's happened in the employer marketplace is employers used to do retiree coverage that was pre-65 retiree coverage. Those are starting to get sunset in the same way that defined benefit pensions are being sunset.
Yep.
And so what you have is people who have left being active employee, they've exhausted COBRA, right? And they can't get to Medicare yet.
Sure.
And so they have to bridge the gap. That means a spouse has to go work, they have to find another job, or what happened under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is these exchanges popped up, state and federal exchanges, that they could access coverage, guarantee issue. Some would get subsidies and tax credits, and that was a great solution. Well, now, if we change that model, these folks are being affected.
Okay, so we're going to get a little hyper local for you right now, the viewer, and I apologize, but it's the only way I'm going to grasp the concept. We're in Indiana.
Yep.
We got to talk about Indiana, and then maybe we can extend the understanding of that beyond Indiana. In Indiana, as of a week ago, there were 4 companies which would offer coverage via the Obamacare marketplace.
Correct.
Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and Indiana was one of the states that chose to use the federal marketplace as the state's solution.
Okay.
Right? So yes, the Obamacare marketplace.
Do you know how many states made that decision?
Oh gosh, I used to have this memorized. It was roughly a third of the states did that. Well, roughly a third of the states created their either a state-based exchange that they run or a partnership exchange, meaning it was a hybrid between state and federal. And then a majority of the states, 2/3 roughly, created a no exchange or no partnership and literally opted into the full federal version.
And that's what Indiana did.
That's what Indiana did.
But this week, Anthem and MD Wise both said, we're out.
We're out. Because the filing deadline was this week. Because they had to, so even though it's a federal exchange, the State Department of Insurance, in Indiana in this example, you have to file as an insurer who intends to sell both on and off exchange policies. You have to file with the Department of Insurance. Well, that deadline was approaching.
Okay.
And so they had to call the shot this week.
Okay, but that is based on the idea that if Obamacare still existed come January 1st, 2018.
In its current form, yes.
Okay. And so they've tapped out of that, but and we're jumping way ahead, but let's say something gets passed and it goes into effect January 1st of 2018. By the way, is that the day they're targeting?
I mean, at this point, they would have to move pretty darn quickly for that to be true. Because
they seem to be moving pretty darn quickly.
Think about when Obamacare passed. It was passed in March of 2010, and the first exchanges came on later.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's really quick moving. To be able to, like 6 months later, have some version that replaces or enhances or changes the current exchanges.
Okay.
That's a lot of fast moving because, again, even if it's federally mandated, the state departments of insurance in each of the 50 states and the District of Columbia are going to be responsible for facilitating this.
Yeah.
And the wheels of government only move so fast.
By the way, I was in D.C. last week, and the license plates for people who live in the District of Columbia say taxation without representation. It's pretty aggressive. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty aggressive. It's true.
It's flipping the bird.
It is. There's a bird involved. Do you like I just added the pig to the desk today.
Speaking of birds, you got to.
I thought about naming him Old Major. What do you think? It seems appropriate?
I think it's very appropriate.
Yeah. So, okay, let's say we switch. We're jumping ahead. January, whatever, doesn't matter the day. We're on Trump Care. Is there a federal exchange?
It looks like there will be a version of the federal exchange.
So are going to people have to apply to be back into that, the companies?
Yes, or what they already have filed, might have to be tweaked. But what's really going to change most is not the fact that there is or isn't exchanges. What's going to change most is the people who buy in the exchanges, individuals like you and I, if we were to go buy, how we qualify for the different credits and subsidies.
Okay, so this is what we need to dig into because I read something. By the way, it turns out if you read something on the internet,
it's true.
It might not be.
Well, fair enough.
So I read this, and I gotta help me understand. Basically, you would pay a surcharge for conditions you have, a pre-existing condition, if you will. What was one? It was hemophilia.
Yeah, a chronic condition, you could not get rid of it. Very expensive to treat.
So the annual rider on the policy, from what I saw, was $300,000.
Which is a pretty good deal because hemophilia care is north of $1 million a year.
Okay, so
I mean, I'd say that tongue in cheek.
Yes,
but
of course.
Nobody can afford $300,000.
But so how does that? But is that real?
So okay, Maybe. Here's what's going to happen. So for all 50 states are going to still have either their state-based or federal exchange, and that's going to operate essentially the same way as it does now.
Okay.
And the Senate bill, as well as the House bill, said there are the same pre-existing condition clauses that exist under Obamacare will exist in the future.
All right.
But here's the exception. This is the kind of the trick door. They say, which is
trap door?
Yeah, trap door. They basically say each state can then file for a waiver that allows them to waive out of those protections, either state or federal level, and create their own version of how insurance is sold in their state, which is the way it used to be pre-Affordable Care Act, pre-Obamacare. So Indiana,
Which means that then they could exclude people.
they can't exclude people. They still won't be able. They won't be able to deny coverage.
Okay.
But they can rate up significantly based on gender, based on age, based on actual health status. Which Obamacare, what it did was at the federal level,
Pooling.
it pooled everybody, community rating, and said gender doesn't matter, health status doesn't matter, age matters very little.
Okay.
And now what they're saying is that'll still be true if you stay opted into the system.
Yeah.
But now you have the choice at the state level to opt out of that, and then you can start underwriting based on gender, fully based on age and health status. So in your hemophilia example, they can rate up. They can't deny coverage. They used to be able, pre-ACA, they used to be able to deny coverage. Now, they won't be able to deny coverage, but how much will they charge?
Isn't it a de facto denial if you're saying, well, we're going to have to tack on 300,000?
In that example, of course.
But that's a denial, but it's not.
Right.
So what does a person do in Trump Care who's a hemophiliac
In a state that opts out,
in a state that opts out and
Yep.
they can't afford
Gets
the
the waiver.
300,000?
they move, they get a job, they qualify for hopefully,
They get a job with coverage.
yeah, with an employer-sponsored plan.
But how will, okay,
I mean, that sounds awful, but
Yeah.
practically speaking, they moved to a state that didn't opt out. I mean, I was literally thinking about this morning.
No.
What happens? Well, what could happen, and this is very interesting, states, and they're going to be states that tend to be more left-leaning,
Yeah.
are not going to opt out. And they might wind up attracting people because they offer more rich coverage.
is that a, okay.
It's a
good
mixed
is-
bag.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, well, is that a good thing for the state?
It depends. Now, the state is going to have the burden of that healthcare cost within their state, which is going to rise the cost of everyone in the state, even those that aren't in that system.
Yeah, so if that happens, and let's say a bunch of hemophiliacs then move to California,
Sure.
then that would increase the coverage for everyone
In California.
in California. Wow, this is okay.
Now, that's a hypothesis. I don't know that
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen, but I could see that being an unintended consequence.
Okay, so there's people watching this. By people, I mean like 6.
Like your mom,
Yeah.
my mom,
Yeah.
Sarah.
No, my wife doesn't watch. That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple people watching this. What if they're covered by a group plan right now? Will the AHCA affect anything?
And there'll be a new name for it when they merge the
good.
two
We have
bills.
new name.
New acronym.
Good.
Sweet.
Will it matter? Or what to them?
So what I would tell the people listening, our mothers, is it won't.
Yeah.
It won't practically, at least for a while.
Okay.
Now, where it could have an impact is, and again, your question was if you're covered under Medicare or an employer's plan,
Right.
what will the immediate impact be? And essentially, very little.
Okay.
Okay. The main impact is going to be reduced burden on the employer, so the plan sponsor. So the paperwork and reporting requirements that the ACA had are now going to go
that's a
away.
big pain.
Yeah, and that you can say, well, that's
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
to make doing business easier.
Yeah. And it's meant to be business friendly. I mean, that's a spin.
It's meant to be, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, whether it actually winds up being or not is, the proof will be in the pudding.
But it won't bring the cost down for an employer other than the compliance of it.
Right, and there is some cost embedded in
Yeah.
compliance.
Yeah.
Like when we consult with employers and they want full outsourced compliance, we charge them extra
Yeah.
to handle that burden.
Sure.
Well, now they won't have to do that, so that's great for those employers not having to spend that additional money. But where it will eventually have an impact, even on employer-sponsored plans, is, again, I've talked about this before, the Affordable Care Act, the House version, the Senate version. None of these bills, in a meaningful way, truly impact the direct root cost of healthcare. And
That's a single payer problem?
well, it's a single payer problem, it's an innovation problem, it's a technology problem, it's a personal care problem, it's a It's a multifaceted problem.
Sure.
And none of these bills, unsurprisingly, when you think about it, how complex healthcare is, truly get at the root cause.
Sometimes when I talk about financial topics on the show and it delves into politics a little bit, people feel like I'm getting political, right? Because politics and money intersect, as you probably know. But it turns out my intention is not to get political. My intention is to explain it from an expert perspective of like what's going on. Like mine isn't to then so go vote for this person. Honestly, I don't care. Your perspective on this I always find to be interesting because it's the same thing. It's like you don't really have a horse in the race per se or a dog in the fight. What's happening? Skin in the game? You don't have skin.
Pea in the pod?
Yeah, you don't have a pea in the pod. But there are both negative and potentially positive ramifications if this happens.
Some of which are intended and unintended.
And so it's the unintended that I think scares people. Well, I shouldn't say. Maybe it's the intended consequences that scare people the most because it feels hateful or something.
Right. So one of the intended consequences of these two, potential Republican versions in the House and Senate is the rollback of the Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
So we expanded Medicaid. Happened a bunch of different ways. Doesn't matter exactly how it happened. But what happened was millions of Americans, 10 plus million Americans, got newly covered because of the Affordable Care Act, because of the expansion of Medicaid. One of the intended consequences is rolling that back starting in 2021.
So those people all lose their coverage?
I wouldn't say all. Many of those people will begin to slowly lose their coverage effective 2020 and 2021. But that is an intended consequence.
And they will be allowed to apply for coverage, which will be dictated by their health, the rates.
If they're in a state that opts out of the current version of the exchanges.
Can you draw the line of the red and blue of who's going to opt out and who's not?
That's probably a safe assumption. So, Republican states, red states would probably tend to opt out of the current exchange system, and blue states would tend not to.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call it a one-to-one factor. There's going to be some, like Kentucky, for an example. Mm-hmm. Kentucky is generally a red state in the presidential election, and they actually built one of the most thoughtful state-based exchanges and probably would stay opted in because it's, quote, working for much of Kentucky.
Okay, so why don't states look at Kentucky and say, well, that seems like it's working, let's just do what they're doing?
Why don't states look at Indiana and say, the waiver process that we use to expand Medicaid is working, why don't we just do that? I mean...
Then I would get at, well, the Anthem and MDY is just bailed out.
But that's Medicaid, not the exchanges.
Okay.
Yeah, it's super complicated.
Different problem.
Yeah, different problem.
Okay, so the Kentucky solution is really Medicaid-based solution.
The Kentucky solution is how they built their state-based exchange solution. Yeah. The Indiana solution has to do with how we chose to expand Medicaid, not by what the AHCA said, but taking a waiver from the government and creating our own version of Medicaid expansion here, which was the HIP 2.0.
Last time you were here, we talked about, here's the big takeaway. Anytime you hear someone say, just do this, it's
hogwash.
Incredibly complicated.
Yes.
Someone is always going to get screwed.
There's going to be winners and losers. There is no way to pass a healthcare bill in the United States that makes any change that there isn't winners and losers. Okay. It's so complex.
I have so many questions.
Remember, we said this before, healthcare's GDP, so its percentage of the gross domestic product of the U.S. is roughly 20%. So we're talking about 1/5 of the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
You pass a law, it's going to affect people, and there will be winners and losers.
All right, so we pay, my situation, my age, my kids. We pay about $1,000 a month for a high deductible healthcare plan, and then we max out our HSA. Okay, so we don't really use our healthcare plan. None of us have any pre-existing conditions. We're pretty healthy. We go to our wellness visits.
You take prescriptive medications?
I call a lot of cough syrup. Old granddad's cough syrup.
Wait.
It's been a while. Yeah. Will my coverage go up or down? My premium.
Okay, so we have to make some assumptions.
Okay.
We have to assume you stay healthy. We have to assume that Indiana opts out of the current exchange system.
Okay, so let's definitely assume the first thing.
Okay.
And they probably will opt out.
Probably.
Okay,
yeah.
so those...
Okay, so that means that insurers in Indiana, Anthem as an example, Anthem can now begin to underwrite based on...
So they're back in at this point.
Well, yeah, they're back in, or you're buying an off-exchange product from Anthem, and they can underwrite based on gender. They can underwrite based on age, and you and your family are young compared to the other half of the population.
Right.
I mean, you're under middle age.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You don't look it, but Sarah clearly does.
She does.
Yep.
Not in a creepy way.
No.
Appropriately.
Definitely. You also have a healthy family.
Yeah.
Yes. You also have a healthy family, and so they can charge lower premiums to younger, healthier people. So right now, your premiums are higher
because of my neighbor 2 doors down who's 64 years old.
Who's an older, more sick person.
Yeah.
Their premiums falsely went down under the Affordable Care Act.
I got to time out that because you said something that's factually true, objectively true, not fun to hear, an older, sicker person. The harsh reality is if I'm healthy and a 64-year-old is healthy, by the nature of the fact that they're 64, they're actually less healthy than me.
Actuarially speaking, they should be less healthy than you.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So that's not fun to hear. That's one of those things when I said poor earlier.
Yes.
That's not fun to hear, but that's true, and that's not us being tough guys. It's just true.
Yeah, and when you think about insurance, it's the transfer of risk.
Yeah.
And when you think about the transfer of risk, you're using the law of large numbers, that the premium of many go to pay the claims of a few.
I feel like you're telling me my coverage will be cheaper.
I believe that maybe by 2019, your coverage will be cheaper, yes.
Okay.
But not because you became healthier,
no.
Not because we affected the root cost of healthcare, not because you got new subsidies or tax credits, but because the way we underwrite will happen to benefit in the state of Indiana, because I believe they'll opt out, and take a waiver, will benefit folks like you and not your older, sicker neighbors.
Each question begets 10 more questions. Okay, so prior to Obamacare, our health insurance that we purchased on our own was a lot cheaper than it is now.
And do you know why?
Because I wasn't pooled with people that are older and less healthy.
Precisely.
So it's going to go back that way. So I can say, and I have said, that I have been personally affected financially by Obamacare. Now, and I can only speak for myself. I can't even speak for my wife here. I'm okay with that.
That you've been personally negatively affected by Obamacare.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Like
philosophically,
that's good. I'm okay with that. Like philosophically, the idea that how many people got coverage that didn't have coverage? Like 12 million. What was the number?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so if one of the goals of healthcare reform originally, the Affordable Care Act, was to reduce the number of uninsureds, check. It worked. Now, did it work in the way that was most efficient?
Yeah.
Many people can argue that. But we took tens of millions of people who were uninsured and they now became insured.
By increasing the cost of healthcare for lots of people, but as part of that group of people that have more than enough money.
Yes. So if you really want one of the root issues within healthcare reform and these draft, I shouldn't say draft, the House bill, the AHCA that already passed, and the Senate draft that they're going to put on the floor in theory next week, and then they'll have to do a conference committee to bring them together if it passes. One of the biggest core issues of that is a tax cut for folks who tend to be more wealthy, because we're taking out of.
But how's the tax cut occur though? Like, what is it within? It's not on the income tax cut.
No, but so for example, one of the things that happened was we took
cheese.
Cheese is great.
That's not what you were going for.
No, but while we're talking about it,
I do like cheese. What's your favorite cheese?
Right now,
you have a right now?
Yeah, right now my favorite cheese is the Manchego cheese, which is the sheep's milk cheese.
Do you like 6 or 12 months?
I'll take either.
12's a little salty. I always think I'm like, well, it's longer age.
Bourbon's typically
right.
better. Yeah.
So I was like, I'll go with the 12, but then I always get down with the 12-month Manchego, and I'm like, should have gone for the 6-month.
Now, what I will tell you is, the reality is, I like whatever cheese is in front of me.
Yeah.
So if you slap down a Kraft Slice American, I'll be like, that is good cheese.
Yeah, I like cheese.
Yeah.
Where were we? You were going for
no idea. Oh, so the tax on higher income earners on Medicare. So the payroll tax that you pay, the self-employment tax you pay, went up under the ACA to fund Medicare and a bunch of other things. That's now going to go away. The tax that was taxed to health insurers is now going to go away, although it got suspended, but it's going to go away for full. So a lot of these things that tended to benefit corporations and higher income individuals, or that negatively impacted them under the ACA, are going to be taken away by the new version, the Republican passed version in the House and Senate. That if you're a laissez-faire, take away my taxes, fiscal conservative, I want to keep as much money and let corporations, and it's trickle down, then you're like, that's a win.
I have a self-indulgent question.
Yes, sir.
I like to think myself as politically independent. I really do. I'm not in the GOP. I'm not a Democrat. I'm just somewhere in the middle, right? If I say aloud, I'm okay with my premiums going up $400 a month, so tens of millions of people can have coverage, that in itself is a more liberal perspective, is it not?
Yeah. I mean, ideologically,
yeah,
that is something that you would see on the platform of the Democratic Party or liberal parties, and not on the Republican or conservative parties.
And
I think the real solution is we need to have more political parties like they have in the UK, where they have like 15 political parties. I think that'd be awesome.
Like the bucket head guy?
Yeah.
Seen him?
He was great.
So I guess this is where I'm going to get angry comments, and I'm used to it though at this point. How could someone who has means, more than enough means to take care of what they need to take care of, how could they say, nope, I'm going to take that extra $400? Like, yeah, I know this is a stupid question. It's a stupid question.
So I am not an expert on the sociology and psychology of that. Yeah. You're probably a better expert than I am. But so I think you get to a certain level of income, like the George Soroses, and the Microsoft guy,
John Gates.
Bill Gates. Yeah, Billiam Gates. Right, they get to just stupid level of money where they're like, yeah, tax me, what do I care? Because if you take away half of what they have, they still have an unbelievable amount of money, right? But then there's the sort of everyday millionaires that are self-made, that are entrepreneurs, that fight and scratch and claw for everything. Yeah. And when they see a 40% tax bill, they're like, I'm killing myself for this. Yeah. And there's psychology in both of those wealthy places.
Guess I've just separated out conveniently for myself the increased cost, tax, if you will. I'm okay with the direct result from it. Now, there's other things that drive me bonkers, that make me as fiscally conservative as anybody.
Say like a $600 a month lease on a Ford Fusion.
Look, I don't know.
For a mayor, hypothetically.
I had a city council person.
Well, I thought their offer was quite nice.
It was quite nice.
She was going to buy you a beer?
She's going to buy me a beer and explain it to me. But here's the thing. I'm not going to say I know more than they do. But on the topic of fiscal responsibility, they're a bit in over their head by having a beer with me to talk about it. It's like, I don't know if they think they're going to be able to explain it away and government-y talk. In the city in which I live, the mayor drives a Ford Fusion and he leases it for $600 a month. And this has angered me.
And I think you should, this is a huge divergence from the topic of this episode, but I think you should go into that conversation with as open a mind as possible, because it is theoretically possible.
That's a good idea.
That there is actually a good fiscal business reason why this is true. It remains to be seen what that is. Go in open to that and then work backwards from there.
Okay. Because
you're going to get a free beer out of it.
I love free beer.
Yeah.
I should have him on this show, but that probably won't happen.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Him meaning the honorable mayor?
The mayor and a city councilwoman. I could have them both on the show.
I think it's a fantastic idea.
I could offer, but they'll say no.
If I were them, I would say no.
I would also say no.
I would desperately say no. I
want to offer them, like, look, I would recommend you say no.
Yeah, as your legal counsel, do not accept this offer.
Okay, so conceivably, my premiums go down. Will HSA limits go up?
Yes.
How much?
And some versions of these bills that we've seen, they double. So when you say limits, you mean the amount of money you can contribute and get a tax deduction or a pre-tax contribution through an employer plan. Yeah. Some double.
Okay, so this idea has gotten a lot of crappy feedback because it goes back to wealthier people it's a solution for wealthier people.
So I've seen this written, and this is actually not a terrible summary. Now, it's way more complex than this, but if you want to summarize the Senate draft and the House passed bill, essentially this is the summary.
Okay.
Wealthy people get a huge break.
Yeah.
Lower income people get worse coverage for more money. They have to pay more money for worse coverage than they have today.
So I'm actually going to get better coverage. Am I going to get same coverage?
You're probably going to get same to better for less.
I feel bad about this.
I get why you feel bad, but remember, you had to pay way more for premium for slightly less rich coverage than you had before the ACA. So for you, you're almost being returned to where you were.
Yeah.
And so, but I've heard that explained, like that's how you summarize this draft legislation, and it's technically not that far off, but it's more complex than that.
Okay, so everyone's got this issue politically that is their primary lever of who I'm going to vote for. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's as simple and
it's about
simplistic.
taxation.
Well, I was going to say as simplistic as I vote with my party. Right, I mean, a lot of times.
Yep.
But for someone like me, like I gotta pick an issue that says this needs to be the right way, and then I'll figure out the rest that's going on.
Yep.
You gotta wonder how many people in this country, like, the issue is healthcare, and who are these people? Are they I mean, is it equal side on either side, rich and poor?
Well, maybe now, but up until recently, I don't think there was a huge chunk of the electorate that their issue was healthcare.
Yeah.
It was probably like bottom half of the top 10 on their list.
Right.
But like their issue is healthcare. I think that's the exception, not the norm. Now that's beginning to change with all this, the new law and the what could become the new law. I think people are more taxation, right? I think people are more moral issues. Things like the abortion issue is lightning rod for a lot of people. It's like their issue.
That seems to me
on either side of it.
That seems to me, when I think about that idea that there's one issue, I always go to sort of, we're not going to talk about this, but that seems to be the issue that people get the most fired up about.
Mm-hmm. And I think
wrong or otherwise.
And I'm not going to go on that issue, but I think one of the reasons that President Trump got elected this year, there were a lot of conservatives who vehemently disliked him as their candidate.
Sure.
And knew that if a Republican got elected, even one that they hate, absolutely despise,
he'd be more pro-life.
More important for that than them, he would nominate a justice that would keep the court balanced a little bit right more than left. Yeah. I think that at the end of the day is why Trump got elected. Plus a lot of angry people.
So at this point in time, it's looking pretty likely this is going to happen. And I would say, there's 4 senators that are acting like they're not on board. But my take is there'll be little amendments here and there, and then it'll get done, and there you go.
Right, I agree with that. So there's 4, and the 4, so your audience knows, the 4 senators are far right who don't think the Senate law draft goes far enough to repealing what is Obamacare.
Okay.
So they want it to be more, they want the law to cut deeper.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so if you do that, if you appease them, you run the danger, and the Democrats they're all no's, like that's a moot point. You run the danger of if you appease the far right of the Republican Party, that there are people that are moderate Republicans, so you capture those 4, but then you lose 6 of these. And the Senate can only lose 2 Republicans. So if we get all these 4 and then lose 6, or if we get 2 of the 4 and then lose 3,
more bourbon. I can't even do that math.
But in other words, if they appease the far right of the Republican Party, they run the danger of losing the support of moderate Republicans, which they have to have.
All right, I'm going to ask an impossible question to answer. So I always think sometimes when a senator's up there, this is what the American people need. Isn't their job to say, this is what the people from Indiana need? This is what the people from Wisconsin need, because that's who they specifically represent. So why wouldn't the poorer states, even if they're GOP-led states, wouldn't what the people in those states need, because maybe you've got a higher than average level of poverty, wouldn't they need Obamacare the way it was?
It's great. So West Virginia. That's
a great question?
Yeah, it's a great question. So West Virginia, that's your...
Felt pretty good.
Yeah.
It felt like a dumb question, but it
No,
may have
it's
turned.
so if there is a Republican senator who is generally moderate and from a generally poor state,
Okay.
poor income of people state, they are going to. It's going to be hard for them if the bill becomes even more right-leaning
To get reelected?
and for them to vote for that
Yeah.
because it negatively impacts their constituency and might go against their philosophical sort of moderate conservative beliefs. Take West Virginia as an example.
Yeah.
There are a lot of lower income, poorer people in the state of West Virginia for a whole set of reasons we don't need to dive into, but it's true. It's a fact. And they benefited greatly, that state, both at the state budget level as well as the people of the state of West Virginia benefited greatly from the expansion of Medicare.
Yeah.
If we unexpand Medicare, we roll back the expansion, people in West Virginia will suffer more than the average state because they are more poor than the average state.
I heard half an argument. Oh, maybe you can fill in the blanks for me. That, and I couldn't tell if it was just criticism of Paul Ryan in general, but their point was he's stopped representing the people of Wisconsin and he's really looking out for wealthier Americans. I know that sounds like a talking point, and I'm hoping that people viewing this now will understand that we're that's not my perspective.
Right.
I'm trying to
you're
understand
trying to
it.
unpack it, yeah.
What do you think about that?
So I think you have to understand Paul Ryan's role within the House.
Yeah.
He is the House Majority Leader,
Okay.
right? Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
The Speaker of the House officially. And he is responsible for coalescing hundreds of Republicans and getting them to march in a direction and agree.
So forget his state for a second. He's got another order.
Not forget his state, but he has a role that a typical Republican senator from Wisconsin doesn't have.
Okay.
Now that doesn't mean he should forget his constituency, because if I voted for Representative Ryan or Speaker Ryan, I want him to think about my district in Wisconsin that he uniquely represents.
Sure.
And we have to understand that or flip it, it was Nancy Pelosi a few years ago.
Yeah.
We have to understand that there are constituents in Nancy Pelosi's district who didn't benefit from the Affordable Care Act, but yet she rallied the troops there. So, like, is she a bad person? Right? There are very wealthy people, extremely, some of the wealthiest people in America live in Nancy Pelosi's home district in California.
Back her.
They do, but they were negatively impacted by the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Is Nancy Pelosi a bad person? Did she not represent the interests of her district? Well, it's mixed. The same way with Speaker Ryan now.
Okay, so in Congress, though, like in the House specifically, because there are so many different representatives amongst across a state based on lines and things like that, and there's probably terms for these, but I didn't pay attention to government.
Is this where we can talk about gerrymandering?
Well, I didn't invite him, but he might be here. Ladies and gentlemen,
Gerrymandering.
He's a vodka guy. He's not coming. So is it conceivable that you're going to have a representative that is actually more representative of their constituents because they're smaller little pockets, like Southern Indiana, or
they tend to be more
a more common interest,
homogeneous, homogeneous in who they are and aren't
financially, demographically. Because with a senator, I mean, it's just two. I mean, but I don't even know how many reps there are in Indiana. Like, I don't think anybody knows. I think 1,000.
1,000 reps in Indiana.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty sure.
Yeah. So if you're watching and you're trying to get federal government information on how a bill becomes a law, don't listen to him.
Don't listen to me. I know. So I know my rep. We have the same rep, right? Brooks, is that our rep?
Brooks, yeah.
Okay, so that's like she from what I know of who she represents, of where our swath of people are, she definitely votes in line with that sort of interest.
And I will say that she tends to be pretty in the middle as it relates to far right or moderate within the Conservative Party. I think she actually happens to represent fairly well the district with which she lives and is elected.
Now, she's not going to capture the interests of the far right or the far left.
No.
But that's why she's trying to go down the pipe.
And I that's the sense I get.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
what else do people need to know about the healthcare bill? So for people that are doing all right and are pretty healthy, your premiums, you might see them come down.
Might. It depends on the state in which you live and how it all works. For people who are getting their coverage through Medicaid, nothing immediately will happen, but in the next 4 to 5 years, there'll be a rollback. And so if you benefited from the Medicaid expansion, be aware that you're probably going to not be in a good spot when Medicaid gets rolled back. If you're an employer and you sponsor a group plan, the immediate impact will actually be a reduction of burden from a reporting and compliance standpoint, but the root cost of healthcare is probably not going to go down. And so the same strategies you have in place to control healthcare costs within your population need to continue to be thought of in a multi-year strategy.
I was having this conversation today with a professor of economics at a particular university about take the same problem but switch it to higher ed, of like treating the root cause of cost versus how to fund college.
And let's be clear, the Affordable Care Act and the House bill that's already passed and the Senate bill that's been drafted are not about health care.
Right.
They're about healthcare financing.
Yeah. Just as, for instance, hyperlocal, which always plays well worldwide, at Purdue University, former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels, who arguably could and should be the president of the United States, his method of dealing with the cost of education at Purdue is a funding solution in the same vein,
Yes.
as opposed to why does it cost this?
Right.
Not good or bad, just worth pointing out.
Worth pointing out, yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to go back to the AHSA. So mine's going to essentially double. I can put like 6,700 in or something right now, 62. No one knows.
It's 6750.
Yeah. So I'll go to 13,000 a year.
Yeah, let's
I can
call
put
it
in
10 to
HSA.
13,000 is probably.
Does that mean my deductible goes up to that?
So also this actually goes back to the Medicare Modernization Act, which is where high deductible health plans and HSAs first got invented in 2003, starting in 2004. So
Okay.
it's also where we got Medicare Part D, the prescription drug coverage for seniors. In that legislation, they set minimum deductibles, maximum deductibles, minimum max out of pockets, and maximum max out of pockets for the underlying high deductible plan, and those have been indexing up and down every year. It doesn't look like those will change massively, but what they are going to change significantly is how much money can you put into a health savings account if you have a qualified high deductible health plan.
I'm just going to say it. And there's no reason even to split hairs here. If this goes through, my premiums go down, and from a tax perspective, like, my life gets a lot better.
Yes. You're going to be a winner.
Which is
I mean, you're already a winner.
I'm not. But I mean, I am, right? I mean, in the sense that, like, I'm doing okay. I don't have to go through some of the struggles that other people have to go to. So it's weird. Like, I'm feeling conflicted here, right?
So
it's great. I'm excited, but I'm okay with how it is now because for me.
But you were okay with how it was before the ACA passed.
I didn't know any better.
Right? And you'll probably be okay under the new thing.
Yeah.
Because, there's people that are of means that have made it, and there are those that haven't. And regardless of what we do, you're probably going to stay on the side of okay.
Yeah.
Because, you've made good choices, you've got luck, there's a whole set of reasons why you are who you are.
It's funny, just if getting too personal here, I used to believe that there wasn't a lot of luck when it came to these sorts of things, but maybe the more mature I get, the more I realize that luck is involved.
Yeah, I mean,
who you're born to, where you're born, your health.
I mean, the fact that any of us, even those who are struggling, and are in tough situations, the tough situations in the United States are better than a lot of other countries.
Yeah, sure.
And so, to be born in the U.S. gives you a leg up over most of the globe. I mean, there are some exceptions, but then where are you born in the United States? Who are your parents? Are urban or rural?
I don't know.
There's pluses and minuses to all of it.
Yeah.
So it's and it really so you said I struggle with this.
Yeah.
And so the question for you is, and this is a question for all of us, philosophically, do you believe that access to quality healthcare is a human right? Yes or no?
I'm going to answer that question, but I want to point out that this is where semantics start to get interesting.
Yes.
Because the word you did not put in there was affordable.
Well, that's the follow-up question.
Right. So the answer is yes.
Okay, and so then, who should fund that and how?
That's not the follow-up question you promised. But affordable, which is the extension, to affordable mean it is funded by those that are doing better. And you know what? I'm
that
okay with that.
Yeah, and that viewpoint would be that would be on the platform of the Democratic Party, what you just expressed there. Now, that doesn't make you a Democrat.
No, it doesn't.
That just makes you, on this one issue, if you were voting only on this, you would vote for Democrat. Only on this.
But okay, which is goes back to our point of like, if this was my main issue as a person, then yeah, that would have me voting Democrat. But there are so many other fiscal things that have me just in knots.
Confused,
right?
Yeah.
But again, and sure, we're talking about the poor being affected with the healthcare thing, but there are other things on the other side that are similar in the same vein, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Anything else? You just want to sit here and drink?
Man, I love drinking. In moderation.
In moderation.
And safely.
That way that my liver, I don't know.
And safety and the care and concern for others. No, so here's what I'll tell people. There's going to be a lot of hyperbole that comes out from the left and the right.
Yeah.
People, this is a deeply personal. It affects every American, 20% of the GDP, and everybody has health.
Right.
Or poor health. And so everybody's impacted by this eventually one way or the other. And it's both philosophical and financial. Mm-hmm. So my request to people is just take a breath and do your part to read multiple sources about what could happen and is happening.
Here's the challenge though, Paul. I'm okay with that, but like, I'm a decently smart fella. The only time I ever understand this is when I'm talking to you.
And you can't talk to me all the time.
I try.
I know.
Your wife gets
very generous.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's like some of these words, they just run together. It's like,
Well, it's 20% of the GDP.
I know, but
and
I don't understand.
It's people's lives. It's going to be complicated.
It is complicated.
Yeah. So I urge people to pause, think, read, ask, and try to get varied sources. Yeah. And by the way, that you're like, duh. You should do that on every issue. Yeah. But this one is, I think, particularly important because it is so complex. Yeah. It's so complex.
All right. Well, as things develop, you'll be back.
Be back, and
I'll be right here,
sipping on bourbon. And we'll, our firm, FirstPerson, will post some good content here over the next couple of business days at FirstPersonAdvisors.com just to help people understand. Another source that I like, and it tends to be actually generally left-leaning, is Vox.com.
Sure.
And there's a woman named Sarah Cliff, spelled with a K, K-L-I-F-F, Sarah Cliff. She, for my money, which I paid nothing for it because it's a free website to me.
So it's not your money.
It's really not. She has done the most complete job through this entire process of healthcare reform. Yeah. Now, yes, it's in a site that tends to be left-leaning, but she's been pretty down the middle, and her access and accuracy on detail has been unquestionably good. I don't know her personally. I would love to talk to her someday, but Sarah Cliff's reporting on Vox.com on healthcare reform is about as best as you'll find.
So here's what we'll do. As things develop, we'll have you back in the studio. We'll get a request to speak with her via Skype, and we can just
be fantastic.
Interview her together, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, she'll be great.
All right, because needless to say, when I extend an invite to interview someone, they usually ignore it.
Yep. Oh, we have the bourbon.
All right, man. Thanks.
Yep.
I'm going to shake hands now, and then I'm going to end the show. All right, I'm going to go to this camera. I don't know where we're at. Listen, camera people. Pay attention to this stuff. If it's your operative issue here, then you're going to have pretty strong feelings about it. I have feelings. I can't call them strong feelings. Maybe I'm being too honest. Maybe I look like a terrible person. But I'll tell you this. Here's where I'm at. I will greatly benefit from the change, we think. But I'm okay with how it is now. And you should make the same choice for yourself, right? I'm not telling you what to do. You make the same decision. So there's our healthcare episode as it pertains now. Paul Ashely, FirstPersonAdvisors.com. Advisors is spelled with an O.
It is.
Although my editors at USA Today always want to put an E. What do they know? I'm Pete the Planner, and this is my show. Thank you.
Fire. Low down and filthy, but the discipline is on point. Schooled myself, made my own dojo.
You know, being a millionaire is important. If you want to have a good financial life, you'd be silly not to set a goal to be a millionaire. Sure, resourcefulness is a great goal, but how do you measure it? If you're doing what you should do, you should be a millionaire. But being a millionaire is different than you think. Some people think it's like this. Being a millionaire is about enjoying life all the time. Look, I've seen Cribs, I've seen The Great Gatsby. I know what it means to spend money as you want in the moment. That's what it is to be a millionaire. While others think it's like this. I know what it takes to be a millionaire, saving every penny you make. In fact, I eat on 13 cents a day. I can make ramen noodles every way you can imagine. I sleep in my car on vacation, and I go into fast food restaurants just to steal the condiments because I like fast food restaurant retirement soup. That's how you become a millionaire. It's neither of these things, and it's not a get-rich-quick scheme either. If you have at least $50,000 a year of income, I'll show you how to turn it into $1 million by understanding housing, investing, and how your income flows. Not only that, but I will tell you when you'll have your $1 million. So start your $1 million plan today.
Every day living through the peace of my soul, I remain whole even in the middle of the pain. Even though my life has the rain, I still remain sane, writing and creating for my life. And my pen is my sword given by the Lord, and I use it to fight the tides of restriction. Sometimes I'm conflicted.